City of Stevens Point Personnel Committee meeting, recorded April 8, 2019.
My iPad shows 6 o'clock. I will call the Personnel Committee to order, and it looks like everybody is here.
Except Alder Nebel is excused.
Except for Alder Nabel is excused. She's still in Florida. Okay, first on the agenda is a request to hire LTE clerical support for the Stevens Point Fire Department. Chief Finn, did you want to talk about this, or?
I can.
Okay, thanks.
So this is, an employee in the fire department is going to be going out on family medical leave. Because the majority of the time away from work will be without pay, there's funding available within the existing budget.
Okay. Any questions from anybody on the committee? Any questions from anybody in the audience? Do we want to?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Heidi seconds. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody not in favor? I hear nothing, so that passes. Second item on the agenda is the appointment of Scott Badoon as Interim Director of Parks, Recreation, Forestry, and Community Media. And who would like to address this item?
I'll let the mayor, it was his attachment in the packet.
Okay, Mayor?
So we are in the process, as you know, of finding a replacement for longtime Parks Director Tom Schrader. And we have over 30 applicants. Quite honestly, I've lost count. 2 more came in today, and we're in the process of setting up interviews. Director Schrader has been working with his team to make sure that things run smoothly, documenting processes that have yet to happen. Riverfront Rendezvous is pretty much all set up, and he's got Todd, Scott, and Kate in his office that are going to be handling all of the operations in regards to events and things like that are coming up. In the interim, until we have a candidate that we choose to hire, I would ask that Director Badoon be appointed as the department head, so those 3 people have someone to report to, and it gives some overlap with Scott and Tom, so we can kind of keep a smooth transition.
Any questions from committee members? Tori?
First, I'm really grateful that Director Schrader is involved in this process, but I just want to make sure that through this process, there's no attempt here to put parks underneath Public Works. Is that correct?
It's, the plan is to keep parks autonomous. There may be some requests to move community media. That seems like a pretty likely request that's going to be coming forward. But as I committed to Director Schrader before he left, in no way will I put the park system that we have here in Stevens Point in jeopardy.
Other questions from committee members? Questions or comments from those in the audience? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Alder Dugan, move to approve. And I'll second. All in favor? Any more discussion? Nope. Okay, all in favor of appointing Scott Badoon as Interim Director of Parks, Recreation, Forestry, and Community Media, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, and that motion passes. Number 3 on the agenda is the 2019-2020 tentative agreement with the Stevens Point Police Officers Organization. And who is?
Well, we'll sort of probably tag team this. I don't know if everybody saw the email I sent out to the alders with the updated map for residency for our police union. The reason we had to update the map is because the police department moved from City Hall to this location, so that required that that be updated. A lot of the items that were included in the tentative agreement were cleanups of language, because of the recent Supreme Court decision for membership and dues deduction for union members. We needed to clean up that section. The chief and the bargaining unit, as you are aware, entered into the K-9 agreement. We now have K-9 officers, so we're continuing that as a side letter to the agreement. The chief also worked with his staff to facilitate creating 2 permanent shifts. That will continue throughout this agreement as a side letter. On that contract, the bargaining rep that union used to have wanted to keep some old language in the contract that had been lined through since 2011. So we're cleaning that up as well. And then with regard to wages, it's 2.5%. For 2019 and 2.5% across the board for 2020. We are also increasing the clothing allowance from $500 a year to $700 a year. That's for their uniforms and their shoes and everything that goes along with that. That hadn't been increased in quite a number of years. We had checked on that during the course of bargaining. Some title changes. The corporal title is now becoming sergeant, and the sergeant title is now becoming lieutenant, to mirror what other communities have in their police departments. And that pretty much sums it up, correct? So if you have any questions, I participated in bargaining, the city attorney did, the chief did, and Comptroller Treasurer Laddick did as well. So if there are any questions?
Questions, Alder Dugan?
Yeah, I'm curious, and perhaps others may be, as to what the advantages are of having our street or our police department residency in such a wide district, all the way up to Wausau area and way down past Almond. What are the advantages of that?
Well, just a couple of things. The former agreement also had a map that had been in the contract for quite a number of years, right? Under recent changes at the state level, we can mandate a 15-mile radius for emergency services, which here in the city would be police and fire. However, we have a number of current employees that would impact. It's pretty difficult when you've got an employee that's been with the city for 10 or 15 years and say, well, now you have to move. Chief, I don't know if you wish to elaborate. The other issue we're seeing this day and age with recruitment for both police and fire, so for protected services, it is becoming difficult to get a good response to recruitment, to have a good pool of candidates to choose from. So that is another somewhat of a perk, I guess.
Yeah.
And to speak to the recruitment portion of it, obviously, if we can hire somebody locally, whether it's Wisconsin Rapids, the Wausau area, Mosinee, or Stevens Point, or the Russell area, if we can keep those individuals, obviously, they're going to want to stay because they have family, and that's a lot of what brings them here. Or they have come to the university, gone through school here, and fall in love with our community.
Yeah.
But we find with, again, today's technology, the roadways as they are, clearly an officer that has no children, no matter how far away, is probably going to get here much sooner than somebody who lives in a home and has a few small children. So, again, the prior chief, Chief Carpenter, had a 25-mile radius. We had 2 different portions of the map that kind of conflicted, and so that's why we came up with this.
Yeah.
And
One more question. Do you think there might be an advantage to police and fire, but police especially, knowing Stevens Point really well, for protection efforts? I'm just thinking it would help a great deal if they really knew all the neighborhoods. Do they, even if they don't live in Stevens Point?
Well, they patrol 24/7, holidays, weekends, snow, rain, sun. They know the communities. And unfortunately, they deal with people in the worst moments of their life. So they very much know the community, as well as The city is divided into 3 particular areas, and annually we have officers assigned specifically to those areas for partially that reason, to get to know when the stores are open, who the employees are, when they're coming and going. So when those things stick out of the ordinary, they're able to respond better.
Thank you.
Other questions for Chief Skiba? Okay, oh, Alder Jennings.
Just following on that comment, I mean, I would like it if all Stevens Point employees lived in Stevens Point for economic reasons, but Director, if you could just say that that's illegal. We can't do that under the law, right? We cannot mandate that.
That is correct.
so.
We cannot, no longer mandate that under the law.
Comments or questions from those in the audience? Okay. Alder Phillips.
Mike Phillips, Alderman, 10th District. Totally wrong. They can live at Petenwell. Look at the map. That's an hour. That's almost an hour from Point.
I know.
That to me is totally unacceptable. What's wrong with the boundaries you have right now? I understand there's some people living outside those boundaries right now. They shouldn't be. They should be within the limits now, and we don't need to broaden them. This excuse of finding people and everything else. Alderperson Jennings said, and so did the chief, they like to live in Point because they're in Point. Love to work here. Well, why shouldn't they live here? At least not stretching it out miles and miles. And what about bad weather? Will they even get here? If there's an emergency, it should be a quick response, not an hour drive. Thank you.
Chief, I pulled this out of my labor agreement, the current map. So can you perhaps address for Alder Phillips concerns about response times and how much overall different, other than the jiggity-jaggedy lines on this map, is than what is before the Personnel Committee this evening?
So again, minimally, we're expanding it by a mile or 2 in most areas. The reason effectively that the prior chief flattened out the top simply for political reasons, didn't feel he wanted officers living that far north in another community. That's the only reason, and it's supposed to garner some votes for, quite frankly, approval of the contract. What I can tell you is, when I started here in the early 90s, we had over 300 people applying for one job. We now have 60. That should be telling all of you something. We also have a very stressful job, and the idea of sometimes not only policing the community you do, but then going grocery shopping and being confronted off-duty about an issue really doesn't allow the officer to unwind appropriately. So it's kind of a balancing act. Again, we have many officers who live within Stevens Point, and we have some who don't. So again, we modified and clarified a radius effectively, so.
And do you have issue with people responding in situations of an emergency when there's a call-in?
No, we do not. And again, our agency is a large enough one in central Wisconsin, again, second to Wausau, and then falling behind, again, slightly larger than Marshfield, Wisconsin Rapids. And we have a very good turnout when we are seeking officers. Obviously, we plan where we can. When we have emergencies, we have the call-out system. We partner with State Patrol. We partner with Sheriff's Office as well. So I would say not. And actually, if anybody pays attention to weather, it's cops and firefighters. And we're well aware that if we need to leave early because people drive slower, rightfully so, on the highways, we do so. Our attendance is very high for people getting here, typically half an hour, 45 minutes early. So.
Are there other questions from those in the audience or on the committee for Chief Skiba or Lisa Kusch? All right, would somebody like to make a motion?
And the motion we'd be looking for is recommendation of the ratification of the 2019-2020 labor agreement if you are going to approve it,
Okay,
which I hope you are.
I will make that motion. And it's seconded by Alder Oberstadt. Any more discussion about this? Okay, all in favor of approving the ratification, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, and that passes. And we are adjourned at, looks like 6:16.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.